Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I grew up on a horse ranch in Colorado. We had a long piece of property, about 80 acres, and we raised Missouri fox trotters. We have lived there for almost 20 years when some folks bought a strip of property way at the back of our land. It was a strange plot of land as it was very narrow and was sandwiched between our back fence and a busy county road. We were surprised anyone would buy it actually, as it forced the house to be pretty close to said road. Well, we never meet these new neighbors until one day my dad gets a notice from a lawyer telling us that after having surveyed the property lines, our back fence encroaches on their property between 3 to 6 inches depending on the spot along the fence line. These folks had never met us, never introduced themselves. Our first introduction was this legal demand. My father was a salt-on-the-earth kind of man, very kind, but also very strong-willed. He called these folks, arranged the meetup, and tried to talk some sense into them. Did 3 to 6 inches really matter that much? And why had they not come to us to talk it through? He even offered a number of different compromises. These folks were hostile from the get-go. They demanded he move the fence immediately, or they would too. Apparently, the law stated that they had to put their house so far away from our fence line, so they wanted to push it as far back from the road as they could when they built it. So they wanted these 6 inches very badly. I still remember when my dad got home from that meeting. He hung up his hat up and shook his head when he told my mom, in his slow way, "Well, looks like we got the kind of folks for neighbors you don't ever want to have for neighbors." They sued and won, and we were forced to move the fence in 2 weeks. I say we because I was a free slave labor, as all farm kids are in this kind of thing. All that fencing material at the time were a big cost for my family, but we got the work done in early spring. But here is where the fun comes in. So the new neighbors broke ground and built all through the end of winter and into spring. The very next weekend after they had moved into their house, Dad rousted me out of the bed and we took the big truck into town to the lumber yard. I was extremely puzzled as we loaded up a bunch of fencing material and building supplies. We didn't have any big projects going that I knew about, and I kept asking him what it was for. But he just told me to wait and see with a devilish smile on his face. We built a pen and a small enclosure very near our back property line, directly behind the neighbor's new shiny house. The next day, one of our farm friends delivered a half-dozen pigs to their new home. Dad insisted on feeding those hogs table scraps and all the things that would go in the composter, as well as some good balanced hog feed to keep them healthy. Now you may not know this, but the smell of pig excrement is directly related to what they eat, and also their pen. Table scraps make them smell bad, and I mean bad. I had to drive the four-wheeler back there every day to take care of them, and within a month, halfway there, and my eyes would start watering. It smelled so bad. When we mucked out the pen with a bobcat, we also made the pile right next to the bin. I can't even imagine how bad the smell was living in that house. The neighbors, of course, freaked out, and again, without ever even trying to talk to us, went to the legal route. And they lost. The area was zoned agriculture, and my dad had done his homework to make sure he was breaking no laws or regulations. The pigs were far enough from us and our other neighbors that it didn't bother anyone, but the people he wanted it to bother. Come fall, when winter moved in, we sold the pigs to slaughter, and Dad stacked up a bunch of building supplies next to the pen and let the neighbors know we would be expanding the profitable operation in the spring. And that's when they came out to scream at him. He smiled the whole time, speaking in his slow, steady way. The new neighbors sold their new house in January, when the ground was frozen and the new owners would not smell the pen. Though as soon as the old neighbors were gone, we tore down the enclosure. spread the nasty stuff on the hayfield, and the new neighbors never had any bad smell come spring. They also were great neighbors and are still lifelong friends. Just never mess with a rancher. Edit. Since I have gotten this question a bunch of times, this is what my dad proposed to the neighbor after getting the letter to move the fence. But before we ended up in court, he really did want to try to cultivate a good relationship with a new neighbor, even though they started on such a lousy foot. He offered to sell them 5 acres of land at the back of his property at a super affordable price so they could have a better plot. And get, well, back from the road. Our back fence line was almost 5 acres long, so it would have shaved an acre-long line off his all. And that was wooded land, that was not good pasture land anyway. But they were not interested. They had plenty of funds too, by the way, as they were sitting on $1 million payout from selling their home in California, which we knew as they brought it up multiple times in the discussion. Statements that they had all the money they needed to take us to court if we did not comply immediately. My dad asked if he could move the fence over time rather than being hit for the cost all at once. Ranchers are not made of money. We could move the section right behind the proposed building site immediately to help with planning, etc. first, but they weren't willing to do that. It all had to be moved immediately. Lastly, my dad was friends with the 2 guys that did the inspections for the county for this kind of stuff. We have built many additions and changed on the ranch over time as well. They were all in a volunteer fire department together as well. He offered to get them all together and see what options they had for dealing with the offset issue. The neighbor refused, again, demanding the fence be moved immediately. If you see a theme here, so did my dad. There is no pleasing some people. So my dad let them take us to court, and I later found out Dad was using the time to save up some money since he figured he would have to move the fence, and that was expensive. And he hoped maybe the neighbor would not push it that far and come to work with him rather than go to all that cost. I know my dad reached out a couple more times to the neighbor before things went to court as well. So this story takes place like 5 years ago, when my husband and I were broke college students with a young baby. We worked hard to afford our bad little duplex, $600 a month, and necessities as well, while trying to finish our degrees to one day get ahead. Our duplex was one in an entire neighborhood owned by a large company and managed by a super sketchy married couple who lived on the same street. Before our kid was born, we did the normal excited new parent thing of painting his nursery and decorating blah blah blah. Our lease stated that we needed permission to paint, which we obtained from the property manager, the husband of the couple. He insisted they would be fine, and being young and naive, we did not get it in writing because he was so chill about it. So, we paint and move on with our lives. A little while later, our lease was up and we had given notice to vacate as we were moving closer to my husband's school. The property manager was understanding, everything was fine, and we scheduled our move-out inspection. Prior to this inspection, we specifically asked him for the name of the paint color we needed to use when repainting the nursery. He flat out refused to give it, saying it was unnecessary to paint, as we've been there so long they would be painting the whole duplex anyway. Okay, cool. Move-out inspection day comes and goes. We left the house in better shape than we found it, aside from a small area of torn carpet right along a seam in a doorway. The property manager inspected and said everything looked great, and we should get our whole deposit back, $400, minus a few bucks for the torn carpet. Sounds good, boss. Enter a period of weeks where we waited and waited for our deposit, eventually leaving messages upon messages with false promises or no return calls at all. Eventually, over a month later, this culminated in a phone call with the property manager, where he said, and I remember this almost verbatim, "I don't know what you're so worried about anyway, it's only like $200 you're getting back." He cited the painted nursery and the huge mess left behind as deductions, and I coldly informed him we'd be going to court. Then, because we didn't feel we owed for those reasons, the place was spotless, When we left, aside from the 6-pack of beer, we left him in the fridge for being chill. Not 1 hour later, he called back and miraculously our refund check had just shown up in the mail. Already knowing he was trying to screw us, we installed a recording app on my phone, one-party consent state, and went to the office. The check indeed was only for $200 of our deposit, and included no list of what they charge us for. This is important detail. We intentionally goaded him into admitting that he had told us not to paint and that the house looked great on move-out, and went on our happy way. Revenge plan already unfolding. We didn't cash the check, and instead emailed the CEO of the entire property company, copying in the property manager and detailing the entire process. The CEO sent back a witty email to a cute little typed-up list of deductions, including all the things we were specifically told we wouldn't be on the hook for. A fun detail was that even by his own math, they owed us $230 of our deposit. No one really had an answer for why they then tried to issue a check for $200. But whatever. Joke was on him, because we began digging through all the state regulations on security deposits and refunds, hoping to prove that our length of stay meant he couldn't charge us for wear and tear things like carpet cleaning and so on. And in our search, we instead happened to stumble upon a statute requiring landlords to return security deposits, refunds, and an itemized list of deductions within 30 days, or lose a right to withhold for actual damages and be subject to triple damages if the landlord is thought to be maliciously withholding the refund. So we typed up a demand letter for our entire security deposit, citing the statute, which he had broken because we didn't receive any refund offer or itemized list until 6 weekends later. And when he sent a witty reply, we filed in small claims court for our entire deposit plus triple damages and court costs. Now, I don't know if it's clear at this point, but I can be really petty if I feel like someone is trying to screw with me. And it was clear this guy made a career out of stealing money from low-income renters who likely could never afford to fight it. I was mad. I spent the next month before our court date compiling all email correspondence in which he'd screwed himself over numerous times by providing written documentation that he exceeded time limits, also charged incorrect amounts, and so on. I also compiled phone records showing dozens upon dozens of unanswered and unreturned calls to the property manager, and detailed accounts I'd made immediately after hanging up on lies from the property manager. I printed out a screenshot from the company's own website detailing that the CEO's role as a legal advisor, so I could innocently claim, shouldn't he have known the statutes for these issues? I printed all the relevant statutes and highlighted the important parts. And then I made 3 copies of everything and nicely compiled each in a binder complete with sleeve protectors and page numbers. One for our own reference, one for the jerk property manager and the CEO, we weren't sure who would show up, and one for the judge himself. We also took our handy little recording of the property manager admitting to all the crap he lied about, and then pretended to have never said it. Needless to say, the judge laughed at how prepared we were, asked if we were law students, and then awarded us triple damages and court fees as well as interest. I will never forget the CEO's face when he looked over and smiled at him. All his dumb emails and disregard for the law were on the table, and rather than giving us the original $350 or so we were promised from our deposit, he ended up paying us over $1,300 a month later. It was glorious. Oh heck, edit. I completely forgot until my husband and I were just laughing hysterically about this. But the CEO also filed his response to our suit with a counterclaim for $1,225 for expenses incurred as a result of the actions of plaintiff. He never really said how he got to that number, but in his last email before we sued, he did say, "I hope we can avoid litigation in this matter, but we will engage aggressively if forced to do so." Wow, okay. I wasn't sure if people would love this story as much as I do, but here we are. Okay, some background here. I'm a 20-year-old professional woman living in Australia who just finished up with a job that had me traveling all over and spending no time at home. I started a new job that lets me work proper office hours and have weekends to myself again. So one weekend I decided to take my baby Dale out for a ride. 2008 Yamaha R1 with custom pearl white paintwork, and go for a ride through the Royal National Park. Everything is going great and I'm having fun racing a few guys on Ducatis and PMWs. Once we get to the other side of the park, there is a huge lookout over the ocean from a large cliff and is popular with bushwalkers, hang gliders and motorcyclists, so there are quite a few bikes around. We all dismount and start to have a chat, when we notice a highway patrol car pull up outside the parking area on the street, and a few people are looking at the sports cars and bikes parked here. When I notice a girl about 10 or 11 eyeing my R1, it has a really nice tinsel art of a lady holding a rose skull on both sides. So I walk back over to my bike and almost immediately her mother walks up behind her. The entitled mother asks me, "Do you know whose bike is this?" It's mine. Normally it's just a show bike, but I really wanted to let it loose this weekend. The nice girl says, "It's so pretty and white." I just smile at her. The entitled parent scoffs, "No, it's not. Girls like you don't ride bikes like this." I am just shocked she said that right to my face. I'm 5'10", 165 pounds and have a short black ponytail, so I'm not that putsch looking. I then pull the keys out of my pocket and start it up and pose a nice girl, and her entitled mother jump back when roars to life because it has a loud exhaust. The entitled parent, looking shocked and then bright red with anger. "How dare you? Are you trying to make us deaf?" Then she marches right up to my face. "You stole this bike, didn't you, you smug witch?" At this point I'm getting angry and the other guys are looking over at me and her and are starting to worry. The Ducati guy comes over and interjects, "Is everything okay over here?" "No, this girl has stolen this bike and is trying to make me and my daughter deaf with it." He just gives her a puzzled look. "Miss, I know this woman. We have been on many rides together and this is her bike. As for how loud it is, there are many bikes here louder than hers." The entitled parent is steaming at this point. "No, she's a thief. This is clearly a man's bike." She then notices the highway patrol car outside the parking lot, and then she screams at the top of her lungs, "Police! Police!" The two officers exit the car and dash over. "What's the matter, ma'am?" one of them asks her. "This girl has stolen this motorcycle and was assaulting us with it." The two police officers look a little confused. So the first one takes the entitled parent and the nice girl who is almost in tears by this point off to the side, and the other cop is talking to us to get our side of the story. I then open up the tail of the bike and pull out the registration and insurance papers. And I pull my license out of my wallet to show him that the bike is indeed mine. The cop then takes them back to the car to check them out. Meanwhile, the entitled parent is wailing at the first officer, and a few minutes go by, then the second officer approaches the first one and the entitled parent. The two officers exchange words for a minute and then they both turn to the entitled parent and then her expression turns to that of a wild bull. She then stomps back towards me and the Ducati guy, and she throws her leg right between both of us, hitting my bike square in the fairing, and then the whole bike fell right into the hard asphalt and crushed my helmet in the process. The two officers rush over, but not before I punch the entitled parent right in the face while still wearing my Kevlar knuckle bike gloves. She hits the ground like a sack of bricks and both the Ducati guy and the BMW guy are holding me back. They both know that I would have beaten her to death. The first officer says, "Calm down, ma'am." While the second officer is helping the entitled parent to her feet, he pulls out his cuffs and arrests her. The first officer is getting his cuffs out as well for me, but the BMW guy then interrupts. "Officer, if your intent is to arrest this woman for taking defensive actions against her attacker, you yourself can be subject to criminal and civil prosecution under..." I don't really remember the rest because it was a bunch of legal stuff. The officer asks him, "Are you this woman's solicitor?" "Yes." The BMW then pulls out his business card and hands it to him. The first officer goes to help the other one while we were all left to look at the wreck that was once my bike. And I'm basically in tears at this point. That bike had been the one thing that helped me whenever I was feeling down or just had a bad day. And now, it's been smashed to hell. After we all gave statements, we called a friend of mine to come with a van to pick up what's left of the bike. Later on, my mechanic told me she had done over $5,000 worth of damage to the bike. I won't list what was done because it is as long as this story. Long story short, the judge sentenced her to 2 months prison, 100 hours of anger management therapy, and she lost custody of her kid. I cannot say how much I won the civil case, but it's enough to build a few custom bikes. I honestly don't know what was going through her mind at the time, but I hope I never see her again. Otherwise, I might just lose it again. Thank you for watching and see you next time.